Hello, all you freedom-loving people. The Supreme Court heard arguments in the Tariff case. It turns out that the Obamacare subsidies aren't the real issue, and how do these foreigners keep funding politicians and lobbying to change policies in our country? Okay, let's get into it. Today, the Supreme Court seemed divided over whether to uphold a large portion of President Trump's tariffs in the face of legal challenges. During oral arguments that lasted more than 2.5 hours, many of the justices questioned the Trump administration's interpretation of an emergency powers law that was passed by Congress. Their line of questioning suggested their concern that President Trump might be overstepping constitutional limits and breaching the nation's separation of powers. At the same time, questions from some of the justices indicated that Congress intended to give presidents broad authority in the face of emergencies. So far, multiple federal courts have ruled that reciprocal tariffs, as well as some actions related to drug trafficking, exceed what Congress allows under a law called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. The act allows presidents to take various actions, including regulating imports in response to a declared emergency. But the act does not include the word tariffs. During oral arguments, Chief Justice John Roberts showed some support for the administration, saying that the tariffs are aimed at foreign countries. But he also questioned whether the law really covered tariffs, since the act does not mention tariffs. But Justice Brett Kavanaugh added that Congress didn't need to use the word tariff for the president to have that power. But Justices Elena Kagan and Neil Gorsuch warned that the Trump administration's argument could give the president too much power. And Gorsuch even suggested that it might let President Trump declare war or control foreign trade. Meanwhile, Justices Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas seemed more supportive. They asked questions about how the president could use the tariffs and fees. The Supreme Court is now expected to rule not only on whether the law allows presidents to impose tariffs, but also on whether President Trump's tariffs in particular are authorized by the law. The Supreme Court has until the end of its term in July 2026 to issue a ruling on the case. The race for New York City mayor is over. Voter turnout was the highest seen in decades. The New York City Board of Elections announced that as of 6 p.m. yesterday, the total number of voters across the city, including early voters, had reached 1.748 million. And adding the 102,000 mail-in and early ballots, the total number of voters had surpassed 1.85 million. As of 9:40 p.m. last night, the New York City Board of Elections website showed that with 75% of the votes counted, Zohran Mamdani of the Democratic Socialists had won the mayoral race with over 50% of the vote. Andrew Cuomo received 41% of the vote, while Republican candidate Curtis Sliwa garnered 7.5%. The election of this 34-year-old Indian-American mayor, who was born in Uganda, Africa, and who only became a naturalized citizen in 2018, made history in New York. He is not only the city's first openly socialist mayor, but also its first Muslim mayor. Mamdani is also the first South Asian mayor, as well as the youngest mayor in New York's history. This fiercely contested election also featured a bizarre twist. Some candidates' names appeared twice on the ballot. This sparked widespread speculation about election irregularities. The unusual occurrence of the names of candidates appearing twice on the ballot was first exposed by the betting website Polymarket yesterday. The names Zohran Mamdani and Curtis Sliwa both appeared twice. But the name Andrew Cuomo only appeared once. This repetition, coupled with the multilingual translations on the ballot, has sparked an uproar online. Elon Musk shared a photo of a New York City ballot on X, calling it a scam. But political commentator Kevin Smith said that this is a normal phenomenon. According to New York City Board of Elections regulations, candidates are permitted to receive nominations from multiple political parties simultaneously. This allows voters to support their preferred candidates without having to vote for the major parties. Mamdani won the Democratic primary, so his name appears in the Democratic column. However, he is also the nominee of the Radical Workers' Family Party, so his name appeared twice. When counting votes, Mamdani's total vote count included votes from both parties. Similarly, Republican candidate Curtis Lewa's name appeared as both the Republican Party and the Animal Protection Party candidate. Another highlight of the New York City mayoral race was the high voter turnout. The New York City mayoral race surpassed 2 million votes, with voter turnout that had not been seen since 1969. Between the 1930s and 1960s, New York City elections regularly drew more than 2 million votes. But since then, voter turnout has declined, with the highest turnout since the 1960s coming in the 1989 mayoral election, when approximately 1.89 million people voted. Also yesterday, there were controversial redistricting efforts and other major races in blue states. California voters approved Proposition 50, which is a proposal to temporarily redraw the state's congressional district map in favor of Democrats for the 2026 midterm elections. The newly approved redistricting plan would add 5 Democratic seats. The move was in response to Republican redistricting in 4 other states, which has produced a 9-seat swing in favor of the GOP in the next election. Those states are Ohio with 2 seats, North Carolina with 1 seat, Missouri with 1 seat, and Texas with 5 seats. Indiana will also consider redistricting later this month, which possibly would add another Republican seat. The approval of Proposition 50 came despite President Trump saying yesterday afternoon that the California redistricting proposal on the ballot may have problems and that mail-in ballots were under review. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt explained that an executive order is being drafted to strengthen the elections.
The president posted on Truth Social that the voting underway in California is, quote, rigged. What evidence does he have of that, and what does it mean that mail-in ballots in that state are under legal and criminal review? By whom and why? And also, in this vein, does the White House still plan to issue an executive order banning mail-in voting, and what legal authority do you have to do that?
The White House is working on an executive order to strengthen our elections in this country and to ensure that there cannot be blatant fraud, as we've seen in California with their universal mail-in voting system. It's absolutely true that there's fraud in California's elections. It's just a fact. It is just a fact. They have a universal mail-in voting system, which we know is ripe for fraud. And if you want to deny that, I'm happy to provide you all of the evidence for it. I'd be glad to send that to you after this briefing.
Rigged.
Fraudulent ballots that are being mailed in the names of other people, in the names of illegal aliens who shouldn't be voting in American elections. There's countless examples, and we'd be happy to provide them. As for executive action the White House is taking, yes, we are looking into that. And like any executive order, of course, any executive order the president signs is within his full executive authority and within the confines of the law.
While it's unclear what change might come with President Trump's upcoming executive order, Rick Pildes, a political science professor at New York University, believes that such potential changes for states would likely require congressional approval. The newly approved maps in California will now remain in effect until 2030, when control will be returned to the Independent Commission. In Virginia and New Jersey's gubernatorial races, Abigail Spanberger and Mickey Sherrill respectively won by double-digit margins. Spanberger defeated Republican Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earl Sears, and Mickey Sherrill defeated Republican Jack Ciattarelli. In Colorado, voters approved a proposition to increase taxes on the state's top earners in order to help fund healthy meals for school children. The measure asked voters to lower the state deduction limit for people who make $300,000 or more. Its adoption is now expected to raise $95 million annually for the state's Healthy School Meals for All program, which provides supplemental funds for SNAP. In Texas, voters approved Proposition 15, which affirms that parents are the primary decision makers for their children. Texas also passed a ballot measure that disallows non-citizens from voting in all statewide elections, including local races. The measure passed overwhelmingly with around 74% voting in favor of it. And in Maine, voters rejected a similar ballot measure that would have required residents to present a voter ID to cast a ballot. The measure also changed Maine's absentee voting rules alongside other proposed changes to the state's election. The measure in Maine came at the same time as a similar measure in Wisconsin recently. In a recent development, it has been found that about 40,000 Wisconsin voter registration files do not match Department of Transportation records, such as driver's licenses or identification cards. This was according to Wisconsin Election Commission data that was acquired by the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, or WIL. The revelation emerged during a lawsuit that was filed in August of 2024 by two suburban Milwaukee voters. The two Milwaukee voters argued that the state election commission was failing to investigate unlawful voter registrations and not ensuring that non-citizens are not voting. So WIL sent a follow-up letter to the Department of Justice on the issue after urging the department earlier this fall to take a deeper look at the issue. Lucas Weber, the deputy counsel for WIL, said, "We're not in any way saying that these 40,000 votes were fraudulent votes. We don't even know if these 40,000 names were even voters in the election. We know that they're on the voter registration list. And it's certainly likely, of course, that some of them voted. But we don't know because we don't know who voted and we don't know what all the discrepancies are." Weber said that such unclear registration on the list raises enough concern to warrant answers and greater transparency from the government. In response, a Waukesha County judge ruled in an unrelated case earlier this month that the Wisconsin Election Commission, or the WEC, must check voter registration information with state identification information. The WEC data showed that the name and date of birth don't match on 680 registrations. The date of birth doesn't match on 3,110 registrations, and there were no Wisconsin DOT matches found for 2,069 registrations. WIL urged the WEC to explain why online and handwritten voter registrations were processed differently. The WEC explained that online registrations are automatically blocked when key details don't match, but paper registrations simply follow a different verification process. Then, Wisconsin Judge Michael Maxwell issued a stay on the previous ruling after hearing arguments. In the hearing, the State Justice Department argued that there's no requirement or duty under Wisconsin law for the Elections Commission and the Department of Transportation to share and match data in order to remove non-citizens from the statewide voter list. Wisconsin law requires voters to certify that they are U.S. citizens, but it does not require election officials to obtain proof or require voters to present any proof. The news in Wisconsin came at the same time that truckers warned of a similar issue. They warned about illegal migrants being granted commercial driver's licenses. Shannon Everett, the co-founder of American Truckers United, explained how illegal migrants, many of whom don't even speak English, can pass the driver's license test.
So this has really exploded over the last 5 years, and in what's known as a non-domiciled, the proliferation of a non-domiciled CDL, and also what's known as a B1, B2 border crossing card. And so, there's been an effort across the industry to reduce standards to solve a so-called driver shortage. And in doing so, they relaxed the standards for these driver's licenses to be issued, but only in certain states. One of the things that they found in the sting in Indiana and also the sting in Oklahoma is that all of these drivers are coming from the same regions in the same areas. And so there's a lot of illegal activity going on. And I think that's demonstrated in the fact that not every state's participating in this activity.
Everett also discussed the companies that hire these illegals.
I guess that's also the next question. Who are these companies? I mean, I can only imagine the insurance premiums to hire someone that really doesn't qualify to drive these vehicles.
That's the great question, and more importantly, who's loading them? So most of these drivers are working for new carriers. People would be amazed. The Americans would be amazed at how many new trucking companies are created each and every month, and who is it that owns these trucking companies? And so most of these non-citizen truck drivers are not working for your generational American-owned trucking companies that everybody knows that's based in their communities with large terminals and the appropriate infrastructure for running a safe American trucking company. They're all going into these hot spots in Illinois and New York and California, Pennsylvania. You heard the secretary identify 12 different states, and that's because they have protection in these sanctuary areas. And so the real question I think America needs to start asking in each one of these wrecks is whose freight was on the truck, and why are these shippers not being held responsible for loading people that can't even speak English? And they can't say they don't know, because the guy has to go on the dock, talk to their employees when the truck gets loaded, and get handed a bill of lading. And what we found is that a lot of these shippers now are offering multiple different languages on their check-in screens and with their dock workers.
They also explained the real reason behind the low standards.
I guess the big question is, have other drivers on the road complained about this? Was there a shortage in truck drivers? I mean, you can make a really great living doing this. I'm sure there's plenty of Americans that want these jobs. Is that the reason why they decide to cut the standards?
There has not been a driver shortage, Lawrence. There is a lack of pay versus the lifestyle that our drivers have to deal with out there. And these guys and ladies, our American truck driver community, they have been complaining about the foreign invasion of their industry and the things that they're having to deal with on a daily basis. I hear it from my drivers in our orientation classes every week.
Recently, Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem announced that more than 200 illegal migrants had been arrested in a joint effort between Immigration and Custom Enforcement and the Indiana State Police.
Through that partnership, 223 illegal aliens have been arrested and taken off of our roads. Of those, 146 of them were drivers. That includes 46 semi-truck drivers and another 82 of them that were either box trucks, buses, moving vans, vehicles such as that. The CDLs that were issued to those individuals were issued from over a dozen different states. Many of those individuals could have been licensed in a state somewhere and received their CDL in another state, but overwhelmingly, these individuals have come from sanctuary states such as California and Illinois and New York. If you are here driving on our streets illegally and our highways, you are endangering our citizens, and your days are numbered.
Also, ICE announced yesterday that during a recent two-day operation, they arrested 70 illegal immigrants in Oklahoma, including 34 drivers who were either operating a semi-truck or a commercial truck. Out of the 34 illegal immigrant truck drivers, 26 were issued a commercial driver's license, while 8 were dangerously driving vehicles without such licenses. The illegal immigrants are from 15 different nations, including China, Mexico, Turkey, Colombia, India, Guatemala, and Venezuela. So was Mamdani's victory surprising? Based on pre-election polls, his victory was entirely predictable. Yet, from a common sense perspective, it seems astonishing. Do so many people genuinely believe that they can get free childcare, free public transportation, and raise the minimum wage to $30 an hour without paying any other costs? This outdated socialist ideology has proven to be a failure in numerous other countries. So why are so many educated young people buying into it? In reality, all of this is being orchestrated by groups working behind the scenes. These groups are not all based in the United States either. Some are based outside the country. U.S. law prohibits foreign citizens and governments from funding candidates, political committees, and super PACs, and it also bars them from participating in campaign decision-making. However, many other groups involved in U.S. politics are not required to publicly disclose donations from foreign citizens, governments, and entities, which creates a loophole that influences policy making. For example, a foreign national may not finance a super PAC advertisement that says, "Vote for Jones for president." But the foreigner can pay for an ad that says, "Senator Jones voted to increase taxes in 2025. Foreign donors can also pay for lobbying, think tanks, litigation, higher education, and they can pay for voter registration drives, get out the vote drives, newsrooms, door knocking, and ballot harvesting. These findings were disclosed in a report that was released on October 31st by the nonpartisan group Americans for Public Trust. The report stated, behind the scenes of climate litigation, lobbying, and advocacy campaigns are foreign financiers eager to bankroll the next advocacy fight to enact their vision for our country, to undermine our energy independence, to promote civic unrest, and to ultimately weaken America. The report also named several organizations, including the UK-based Quadrature Climate Foundation, the Children's Investment Fund Foundation, Denmark's KR Foundation, and Switzerland's Oak Foundation and Lauder Foundation. The Children's Investment Fund Foundation is run by British billionaire activist and hedge fund manager Christopher Hone. The foundation holds a $6 billion endowment that is funded by Hone's $60 billion activist hedge fund. Since 2014, the foundation has donated over $553 million to dozens of U.S.-based organizations, nonprofits, and corporations to fund climate legislation, anti-fossil fuel protests, DEI initiatives, and other social justice policies. The foundation also has ties to the CCP, which was more concerning according to the report. The report said the threat of the foundation unwittingly being used by the CCP to spread anti-American propaganda clandestinely across the country only further amplifies the danger of the foreign influence that Hone's organizations are exerting on American politics and policy. The Quadrature Climate Foundation was established in 2019 by British billionaire Greg Skinner and Sunil Satya. It is dedicated to addressing what it terms a climate emergency. According to reports, the foundation has provided nearly $530 million to U.S.-based groups to influence energy policy. The KR Foundation is also a climate and environmental advocacy organization that was established in 2014. Reports indicate that the foundation has spent over $36 million to influence U.S. policy and to phase out fossil fuels. The Oak Foundation was established in 1983 by British billionaire Alan Parker. It has long supported environmentalist positions also, including opposition to the Keystone XL pipeline. The group also advocates for zero carbon targets and the Paris Climate Accords goals. According to the report, the Oak Foundation has donated at least $8.2 million to the Tides Center, which is part of the Tides Foundation network. The center funds the Opportunity Agenda, which is an immigrant rights group that advocates the abolishment of ICE. The Lauder Foundation was established by the Brenninkmeier family. According to reports, the foundation has provided nearly $20 million to 17 groups that are headquartered in the United States. The foundation was established to address issues such as climate change, loss of nature and biodiversity, and social inequality. It seeks to influence decision makers in the financial sector and among corporations. Americans for Public Trust urged lawmakers to consider enacting new legislation when necessary to curb foreign interference. Some states have enacted legislation restricting foreign adversaries from purchasing land or prohibiting foreign funding for state-level referendum campaign activities. Other states are developing laws requiring greater transparency regarding foreign gifts and contracts. However, the report recommends that state and federal authorities investigate the scale of foreign donations in the United States and whether these foreign groups have violated the law. At the same time, they should hold accountable any group or foreign citizen that is found to have broken the law. Now, let's talk about Obamacare. The federal government shutdown has entered its 35th day, becoming the longest shutdown in history. This surpasses the previous record of 35 days set during President Trump's first administration. Although Senate Majority Leader John Thune expressed optimism about reaching an agreement this week, the differences between the two parties remain unresolved. Yesterday, we reported that during the 14th vote on the temporary funding bill in the Senate Democrats once again rejected the Republican-led government funding bill. The vote by senators was 54 to 44, falling short of the 60 votes needed to advance the bill. In this vote, Nevada Democratic Senator Catherine Cortez Masto, Pennsylvania Democrat Senator John Fetterman, and Maine Independent Angus King continued to vote with Republicans in support of the bill. Kentucky Republican Senator Rand Paul once again became the only Republican to cast a dissenting vote. The crux of the dispute remains that Democrats are demanding Republicans must permanently extend the soon-to-expire Obamacare premium subsidies. Republicans, however, criticize the move as holding the federal government hostage, arguing that Democrats were effectively seeking benefits for illegal immigrants. So, how much will the premiums increase if enhanced Obamacare subsidies expire? The Wall Street Journal recently published a series of articles offering a multifaceted analysis of Obamacare. An opinion article published on October 20th reads, Democrats claim that premiums will double if enhanced Obamacare subsidies expire as scheduled on December 31st. That would be shocking if it were true, but it isn't. The conclusion ignores the sizable subsidy that the federal government will still provide to most exchange enrollees if the enhanced subsidies expire, and it overstates the expiration's effect on most households. The misleading claim is based on research by the KFF, formerly the Kaiser Family Foundation. Even the KFF acknowledged the claim was inaccurate. When the author of the article, Chris Jacobs, contacted KFF Vice President Cynthia Cox about a graphic on the foundation's homepage warning premiums will more than double, Cox responded, "We do plan to update the graphic to be more precise." However, the KFF didn't advertise the correction. Furthermore, the KFF's own work demonstrates that the federal government will still pay the vast majority of most enrollees' premiums if the enhanced subsidies ends. It was established last year that in 2024, the enhanced subsidies paid an average of 88% of enrollees' overall premiums. Without them, the federal government would have paid an average of 78% of enrollees' premiums last year. If categorized by income, a separate study from the Urban Institute concluded households with income below 250% of the poverty level, which comprise roughly 3/4 of all exchange enrollees, will pay an average of $750 more a year or $62.50 monthly. Households with incomes just above 4 times the poverty level could face thousands of dollars in heightened costs since Obamacare limits subsidy eligibility to households with incomes below this level. However, KFF data shows that such households represent a mere 7% of enrollees. The Urban Institute estimated that the uninsured rate among this cohort could rise only modestly because they are more likely to pick up coverage from an employer and are more willing to pay the full premium. But your premiums might have increased more than these estimates. According to the Wall Street Journal, the Paragon Institute offers a helpful chart showing that expiring pandemic subsidies are responsible for about 3% of total 2026 premiums. Paragon said, the real drivers are the same structural flaws that have plagued Obamacare since 2014 and rising healthcare costs. The Congressional Budget Office recently released a report indicating that if Obamacare subsidies are permanently extended, then the budget deficit would increase by approximately $350 billion by 2036. President Trump essentially blocked China again from having access to NVIDIA's Blackwell chips after he removed the topic from his list of topics to discuss during his meeting with Xi Jinping in South Korea. Many view the ongoing supply chain battle over semiconductors and AI chips as the new Cold War between Western nations and the CCP. And the Nexperia incident that we discussed yesterday essentially revolves around how to view the relationship between the Chinese Communist Party and Western nations. The Cold War was a confrontation between two systems with differing values, ultimately requiring a decisive outcome. Under such circumstances, doing business with the CCP and transferring technology to the Chinese regime amounts to aiding the enemy. However, Cold War thinking has been largely forgotten by mainstream Western society in recent decades. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1989, the West has fostered optimism and frivolous theories about the end of the Cold War, asserting that American liberal democracy had achieved complete victory. Consequently, it relaxed its ideological vigilance toward communist China. In the subsequent globalization process, American elites mistakenly believed that the Chinese Communist Party could also embark on a path of political liberalization through economic engagement policies. This argument and approach effectively opened the door for the CCP to brazenly steal Western technology using various legal and illegal means. The Chinese Communist Party exploits major Western corporations and conglomerates, on the one hand, brazenly trading market access for technology, while on the other hand, acquiring overseas enterprises and dispatching large numbers of technical personnel to engage in large-scale intellectual property theft. In particular, over the past decade, the CCP has acquired Western technology companies, especially those in EU nations, through Chinese firms, reaching a peak in 2016, a year hailed as China's capital in Europe. Notable deals that stun the world include Geely's $18 billion acquisition of Volvo's entire stake, Sinochem Group's $43 billion takeover of Syngenta, and Media's 11.5 billion euro purchase of German robotics firm KUKA. Nexperia was also acquired by a Chinese company in 2016. At the time, Dutch semiconductor firm NXP Semiconductors spun off Nexperia due to financial difficulties, with shares acquired by Beijing-based Jianguang Asset Management in Jialu Capital. In 2019, Wingtech Technology acquired 100% of Nexperia for approximately $3.78 billion, marking the largest cross-border acquisition in China's semiconductor industry. Beijing has now designated semiconductors, electric vehicles, artificial intelligence, and aerospace as strategic industries, encouraging both state-owned and private enterprises to acquire foreign technologies and production lines and rapidly integrate them into China's domestic supply chain. Business transactions viewed by Western companies are highly likely to be part of the CCP's defense projects. Su Zhiyun, the director of the Institute of Strategy and Resource at Taiwan Institute for National Defense and Security Research, stated that the CCP employs specialized reverse engineering and leverages military-civil fusion to introduce civilian technologies from other countries for subsequent military conversion. A specific example is the electromagnetic catapult system on the Chinese Communist Party's aircraft carrier, the Fujian. This technology originated from the maglev train system at the Shanghai Hongqiao Airport in 2002. It was introduced from Germany's Siemens, and the CCP then adapted the maglev track system into an electromagnetic catapult. Even setting aside national security concerns, handing over advanced technology to Chinese companies is a losing battle for the original developers. Chinese companies excel at industrializing and scaling existing technologies in order to drive down unit costs. Then they use policy and financial leverage to erode global markets. Ultimately, technology developers end up cultivating low-cost competitors against their own interests. And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for your support of Front Page. Please remember to leave a comment below the video. This is really helping us to be seen all around the world. The more people who watch Front Page, the more freedom-loving people the world will have. And please hit the like button and hit the notification bell after subscribing. And please share this video with your friends and family because everybody deserves to know the truth.